Hello and welcome back. We got NFL Week 1 coming at you. This is the NFL main slate DFS Breakdown. We're going to be going through all of the games position by position and do it by ownership. So we'll talk about the couple highest owned guys, maybe why you should play them, why you should not play them, and then maybe a few pivots to go over at each position. All right, now before we get into it, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our channel as it helps us out a ton to just keep giving us out all this free content. Also, there's no better time to just come join us at LineStar. It is only $39.99 a month. Gets you access to the Props AI tool, all of the DFS stuff, the projections, all the tools, the ownership, the optimizer. For all of the sports we cover, it is the best deal in DFS. We want you to come join us. Come get involved. Come join us in the chat. It is a fun time. I enjoy it all. All right, so now let's get into it. All right, so we got ownership week 1. We are going to go over both FanDuel and DraftKings ownership. There is going to be, some slight differences on both. Let's refresh this just to make sure it is the freshest up-to-date info. All right, so on DraftKings, or actually, you know what? Before we start into that, let's go to a little bit of overview. So this is a relatively low scoring week. We only have one game over 50, and that is Miami versus the Chargers. This game should get a ton of ownership, as it probably should. It does have the highest chance of shooting out, but there are some other interesting spots to look at. Rams, Seattle, 46 total. Then you also have Bengals, Browns, 47. Jaguars, Colts, 46. Tampa Bay and Minnesota, 46.5. Tampa Bay. This is the team everybody forgot about, has a total of 46.5, and they're only 5-point underdogs. So I think we should probably look at that a little bit as well. It's kind of interesting. All right, so quarterback ownership. First of all, we got Herbert. He is almost 15% owned. Look, he's in a decent spot. Miami was not good versus this last year. They did, however, bring in a new defensive coordinator. Should make their back end defense a little bit better, but I don't think that this is the game that it's going to look that much better. Herbert does look like he's in a very good spot. He is just high owned, so you're going to have to figure out how to get different a little bit elsewhere. Now, with quarterback, 15% does not scare me that much. There's plenty of ways you can get different. So if you like Herbert, absolutely play it. Next, we got Lamar Jackson. Our LineStar projection doesn't like him quite as much as Herbert for probably a couple reasons. One, they are big favorites. There's a lower over-under. And Jackson might not run as much because it is a weaker opponent. However, there is going to be a new offense for Lamar Jackson and probably a lot more downfield passing, which obviously helps just the point total in the game and Lamar to score more points. I like Lamar. I don't love it. I am a little bummed to see him so high owned and at 8K, but it all does make sense, and he's a definite as far as consideration to play. Jalen Hurts slightly lower as far as salary than Jackson, and he looks great. He's versus the Patriots. The one thing I have to say here is that Bill Belichick has a couple weeks to prepare for this game, and you never like to face Bill Belichick when he has a couple weeks to prepare. With all that being said, he has the highest ceiling in football. So I think you have to consider him. Anthony Richardson, he's too cheap. 5.6K with his rushing ability. This is a guy that is bigger than Derrick Henry and faster than Derrick Henry. I think you have to like this spot for him. He's going to run. There is, however, huge question marks with his passing ability. Now, this game does have a 46 over-under, so I think you can pay down and go to him. The one thing is that, he is going to be the preferred pay down option. All right, this is one that's very interesting to me. This is one of the pivots that I like. Deshaun Watson versus Cincinnati. Look, he started to look a little bit better at the end of last season. And with that, I believe that he's going to keep that going. He's had some time to knock the rust off. He has very good weapons. And I like his outlook in this game, in a game that he is, one, at home, and two, he's going to have to throw to keep up with that Bengals offense. And Cincinnati defense allows more fantasy points away. So I like it. I think at 8% owned, he is very, very interesting. Trevor Lawrence is another one I'm very interested in. Once again, 46-point game total. He got a new shiny new toy in Calvin Ridley, so there's nice stacking options here. And that Colts D just hasn't been that great for a few seasons now. Last year, they were 32nd in allowing 1.8 passing touchdowns per game. I think this is a very, very interesting spot for Lawrence and going almost unowned. Geno's fine. Russell Wilson, I don't love for the fact that we don't know what's going on with his receiving weapons. If Jerry Jeudy does play, I think it is much more interesting. Joe Burrow is in a decent spot here versus the Browns. The one thing is the last three games, he hasn't really been able to do much against them, as that D has got quite a bit better over the last couple of years. Derek Carr, I think, is super interesting. Super cheap and has a lot of weapons. Tennessee defense is bad. Nobody's really going to go there. And he can easily have a 25-point game, as he does multiple times every single season. So I think he's interesting. He has a ton of weapons. The one thing that does worry me here is that Taysom Hill could steal a little bit of red zone work, and that never helps a quarterback. All right, you guys are going to think I'm absolutely nuts here. Look, we talked about it in the intro. 46.5 game total. They're only 5-point favorites or underdogs to Minnesota. Minnesota's D was absolutely terrible last year. 31st, allowing 280 yards a game. Allowed 36 pass attempts. They're going to have to pass in this game to keep up with that Vikings offense. Baker Mayfield probably has his best weapons that he's ever had as a quarterback. Wouldn't be that surprised to see him, get into the 20s at 4,900. So I think you kind of have to consider it. It is gross. But, hey, if you're in one of those big millies with, 200,000 entries, you might have to get a little weird to win it. And then, look, I think Fields is just going too low owned for the ceiling that he has. At any time, he can break out for 40 points, with two long rushes to, really make the slate. The other thing is that he looked great in preseason. It looks like he is a better passer. He has more weapons. I think he is interesting at 7,700. And I can't ever count him out. And when he is this low owned, I have to consider it a little bit. With all of this being said, as far as stacking, with Anthony Richardson and, say, Justin Fields, those are the two quarterbacks I probably would not go to, say, two pass catchers. Might keep it to one with those two, just because they can get there in so many different ways. You could say the same about Jalen Hurts and Jackson, but with them being higher owned, I want the extra correlation, because I don't think many people are going to go to two wide receivers with those two guys. All right. FanDuel ownership, run through it quick. Lamar Jackson's highest, Jalen Hurts next. Richardson's getting some love over here. Definitely like that. And Herbert. down to 11% and almost $1,000 cheaper than those top guys. So that is very interesting over on FanDuel. Also, you got to consider Deshaun Watson here. And of course, Justin Fields and Tua. Tua, 7,700, 3% owned. And the highest game total of the week. They're underdogs, but I think they could easily win this game. In fact, I actually already bet them plus the money to win this game. So I think it's very, very interesting to go with Tua, and you can do, all the stacks you want there. Tua likely doesn't get there unless there's two pass catchers that have a game. I think Lawrence is a little too high priced here, but also in consideration for sure. And once again, I got to talk about Baker. He has a chance, and he's dirt cheap, so love that. All right. Running back wise, we got Austin Eckler, 8,400, 22% owned. He's in the best game. We don't really need to go into it. Every projection system is going to love Eckler this weekend. He's in a good spot. Alexander Mattison, 6,500, 18% owned. Versus Tampa Bay. Tampa Bay has been a team that has been very hard to run on for years. But look, they're allowing 49% more fantasy points to running back when away. Minnesota Rush is one favored. He is now the number one. He has done well in the past when he has been the number one. So I do think there's a lot of reasons here that it looks like Madison's in a good spot. But one of the things we did talk about on the Thursday show and we need to bring up is there's going to be a ton of volatility this week. This week is when projections are the most fragile. We don't have a lot of data to go on. It is all preseason hearsay. We don't exactly know what's going to happen. Everybody thinks he is the number one. He's going to just take the Dalvin Cook role. But it very well could be that he does 60-40 or something like that where he doesn't get quite as much play. So I am a little worried eating some chalk on Alexander Mattison versus a team that typically has been good versus the running back. Same goes with Deion Jackson here. Everybody thinks Deion Jackson is going to be the guy, but I think it is likely a running back by committee situation. Also, Zach Moss is questionable, so I don't love eating chalk on Deion Jackson. Now, if news comes out that he is the guy and going to be the only guy, then that totally changes everything, and at 4,100, you might have to eat some chalk there, but as it stands now, I think you can get away from some chalk here. And even pivot. You could go to Hall, who, is a rookie running back that they like that showed some flashes in preseason. Christian McCaffrey. All right, I think this game, the 41.5 total is a little low. I think both offenses are very good, while both defenses, are solid. I think these offenses are too good to be held to under 20 points apiece. And I can see this game going over 41.5. And I do have some interest in it because of that. Now, Pittsburgh, we do have a healthy TJ Watt. They're much, much better D when that's the case. And they're good against the run. But McCaffrey can beat you always. McCaffrey is a guy that is always interesting. And he has a real nice projection for a running back here. Josh Jacobs versus Denver. I think it's interesting. He's averaging 25% more fantasy points when outdoors, which is a weird stat, but it's the case. And averages 23% more fantasy points against division rivals. The one thing, though, Denver is better at home protecting the run. Typically has been a good run D in the past. And I like it. I don't love it. I am actually surprised that he's this high owned on this slate. Just because he wasn't getting a ton of love over the offseason. But this guy is a stud. He's a workhorse. There's not too many of them in the league. Jamal Williams. Look, there's no Kamara. Kendre Miller has not practiced all week. He had 17 touches in 17 touchdowns last year. You know, he doesn't have as good of an offense around him, but he does have a solid offense. I like Jamal Williams, but Tennessee has always been very, very good against running backs. So a guy that doesn't catch a ton of passes versus a tough run D and kind of chalky, you know, I'm a little more leaning to get off him, but I do not mind him. The workload is going to be there to play. All right, Andre Jones, Derrick Henry, he's in a game we like. That Saints D is not very good. Derrick Henry absolutely makes some sense here. So don't mind there. You know, I think Henry's getting a little old, getting a little beat up, but there's no better time to play him than the first couple games. Shad White, yeah, I think that could be a committee, so I don't love it. I do think Cam Akers is pretty interesting. He came on huge at the end of the season last year. It'll be interesting to see if that's who he is again this year, if they give him all the workload versus a Seattle run D that got beat up last year. I think it's interesting at fairly low ownership. ETN is interesting. Dobbins is kind of interesting. With Lamar Jackson being so high owned, Dobbins is really interesting. He came on strong at the end of the year, and he's against a poor Houston rush D. So he could potentially get in the end zone once or twice and blow up the slate and crush all the Lamar Jackson lines. So there is some leverage there. All right. Let's go over the FanDuel ownership here. So Bijan Robinson, 7,800 at 22% owned. I'm actually very surprised I did not see him on the DK list here. There he is. 8% owned. DK, you could probably take some chances here. One thing I do have to say, and it goes for both FanDuel and DraftKings, is, look, rookie running backs don't always get a huge workload week one. We just saw that with Jahmyr Gibbs. Didn't get much workload. It could very well happen with the Bijan Robinson this week. They have Tyler Algier as well. So, you know, I wouldn't probably play him on FanDuel where he's super chalky. On DraftKings where it's point per reception and he's not chalky, he is much more interesting to me. Just be wary of how, you know, just understand that he may not play 80% of the snaps. You know, it might be a 50-50 situation or even 60-40 to Algier to start off. Nick Chubb. That's who I was trying to get to. Look, he's absolutely low owned. He has crushed Cincinnati in the past. There's no Kareem Hunt, and there's talk about them trying to get him more involved in the passing game. Now, I don't think his rushing is going to get too much of an uptick as far as carries, maybe one or two extra, but I do think that he may get a big uptick in receptions. I think this is a guy that could catch 3-4 balls a week. And if he's doing that with his rushing upside, he will absolutely crush. And he's going low owned, so he is very interesting this week. I do have to say the Denver running backs are interesting. Javonte or P. Ryan, the Raiders D does not scare me whatsoever. And I would not be surprised if they slowly work Javonte in, so P. Ryan may get a little bit more love from me this week, but it is an interesting situation. All right, now Eckler looks great, so FanDuel. Cam Akers is next, 18%. McCaffrey, Ramondre Stevenson. Stevenson had an undisclosed injury, missed practice today. He says he's going to play, but who knows? And who knows what that injury is. Derrick Henry is definitely interesting there as well. Nick Chubb, too low owned in my book, especially on FanDuel where it is 0.5 per reception and not a full point. If you want to get really crazy, you can go Devin A-Chain. He was a full go in practice, decently high pick, and he could split with Mostert. You don't really know what's going to happen there. The Philadelphia backfield is one that is kind of interesting to attack this week. The reason being is there is so much volatility. Nobody's going to play them because we really don't know what's going to happen. It could be a three-way committee, or DeAndre Swift or Penny could get everything, So it is a very awkward situation there, and one that I will take a few stabs at just because there is so much volatility there with a huge potential, 44-point game total, and they're favored. So a decent implied total there. All right, wide receiver wise, Justin Jefferson. I don't need to talk about him. He looks great. He is great, and he's got the highest owned guy. Same with Tyreek Hill. Jaden Reed, for those of you who do not know, he is a Green Bay Packer rookie wide receiver. Christian Watson is out. Dobbs is questionable. They don't really have many guys to turn to now, and Jaden Reed may get thrust into a big-time role week 1 versus a rival in the Bears. So at 3K, you got to kind of think about that. With that being said, we have no idea how the Packers will do their receiving core. Jaden Reed could barely play, and it could be, Joe Schmo, who's a vet and plays 80% of the snaps that goes off. So you don't necessarily have to follow the chalk, but it's an interesting spot to look at to consider on your lineups. Jamar Chase, another great receiver at the top. No big surprise there. Pretty much what this is telling me is people are paying up at receiver this week. So with that, I am more inclined to maybe pay up at running back or quarterback and get some cheaper receivers, because that is going to be the lineup construction that most people are not doing. So some guys to consider that are lower owned. Chris Godwin. We talked about liking Mayfield. Chris Godwin's a very good receiver. Another one is his counterpart, Mike Evans. Mayfield is actually a very good deep ball thrower, and Evans lives with that deep ball. So I think he's very interesting. Chris Olave, I absolutely love. I've already bet his receiving total over, and I think he's in a great spot. Keenan Allen is a great spot. All of the Charger receivers are a really good spot. I especially like Mike Williams. I think they're going to throw the ball down the field a little bit more this season, and that's just Mike Williams' specialty, so I like him a lot today. Marvin Mims, if Judy is out, Mims is going to get a ton of work. The other thing, he is only 3K, and he was already playing with the first teams in preseason and training camp, so I think he is set up for success, and at bare minimum, you got to consider him. Kendrick Bourne, New England. It's hard to trust any New England receiver, but Parker's questionable. Juju's knee apparently is going to explode. Don't really love that. Absolutely love Drake London. Only 10K or only 10%, 5,400. I love it. Think you should do that. Calvin Ridley is an amazing stacking partner with Trevor Lawrence, who's going low owned. Mike Will, like him. Brandon Ayuk is just too low owned. It is versus a Steeler team that can get beat up by the pass. Nobody's going to go there because they don't trust Brock Purdy right now after that horrible showing in preseason. Amari Cooper is a very cheap stack partner with Deshaun Watson, who we like. So I think Cooper makes a lot of sense. He has huge ceiling games. All right, now check over to FanDuel a little bit here. So pretty much same rundown here as far as the highest owned. Tyreek, Jefferson, Chase, all around 20%. Olave, Ridley, 17. Jonathan Mingo, 4,500 is 16%. He is a rookie, really hasn't got that much buzz, and it looks like he's pretty far down on the depth chart for Carolina, so I have no idea why he's popping up that much. I would be very wary of that. It's another situation where we really don't know what's going to happen as far as how many snaps he's going to play. DJ Moore, I really like his upside. I just don't think this is the week to do it. Now, if I am using Fields, I am using DJ Moore as well. Godwin in a good spot. Juju is fine. Addison is very, very interesting as a one-off if you don't want to play or don't have the money for Jefferson. Also, nice little stacking partner. With that being said, I think you could go to KJ Osborne. This is another situation where we're not really sure how it's all going to break down. KJ Osborne, being the vet, could play more than Addison, even though Addison was a highly touted rookie. It's just week one, and these guys, some of these rookies that have been getting a ton of buzz all offseason, it's going to take them a little while to get worked in. Van Jefferson with Cup out, he's interesting. Puka Nacua is also very interesting for the Rams because of Cup. Absolutely love Drake London, and I love Mike Evans. Both of them are very interesting here. Lockett, with that being said, JSN, it looks like he's going to be a go, so he's interesting. Not getting any buzz. He would have if he never got hurt. Jaden Reed's not getting much love here because he's just a little bit low owned, and FanDuel pricing is a little bit softer, so you can get a few more studs. Mike Williams getting no love. Interesting. Same with Amari. We haven't talked about Devontae Adams at all, and we got to. He's in a great spot. Denver allows more fantasy points to wide receiver when home. They allow more fantasy points to wide receiver when favored. And it's Devontae Adams. I don't think there's going to be a huge drop-off from Derek Carr to Jimmy Garoppolo. The one thing is, I don't know if Jimmy Garoppolo has the ceiling to really use as a stacking partner, but I do think Devontae Adams is a solid wide receiver and should be getting some ownership, as well as T. Higgins. Jalen Waddle going 4% is criminal, and the difference between him and Tyreek is not, 8x? 7x for the ownership? That it's just not the case. Actually, it's 6, sorry. Just under 6. There's Puka. Love him. All right, now let's get into tight ends quickly here as we are going way too long. I was trying to make it quick. Tight end's going to be rough this week. So, as we saw, Kelsey was out. Mark Andrews is banged up, so we're not really sure what's going on with him. There's a lot of tight end injury. TJ Hawkinson is an absolute great spot. The one thing I would say is it is going to be very hard for you to say go Jefferson, Hawkinson, Kirk Cousins, and if you want to do a run back in that game, you can, but it's just going to be pricey to try and get all those three guys. Now, Hawkinson's in a great spot. Just Tampa Bay has been very good versus tight end in the past. I like it, don't love it. I think Irv Smith is interesting at 3,600. Really don't know how he's going to do. He's been hurt for a couple years, but he has always been a standout in training camps, and he was again this year. I think Tyler Higbee is very, very interesting at 4,800. He, with no Cooper Kupp, he could be targeted a ton. So he's likely a pretty high floor pick, and then if he gets into the end zone, you're good to go. Njoku, another really, really good stacking partner with Watson. With Watson, he had a few good games. This is a guy that has been on the verge of breakout, I feel like, for a couple years. But last year, it really showed. He takes one more step forward, and he's going to crush the entire season. Pat Freiermuth is another one I think is interesting. You could do a vomit stack with the Steelers and use Freiermuth and either Pickens or Johnson and run back with CMC if that game shoots out, which, look, both offenses are capable if you believe that Pickett is going to take a step forward. Got to bring up Isaiah Likely. Look, Andrews is questionable. If he is hobbled or out, likely he's in a great spot to absolutely crush the slate. His ownership will go nuts, but if he is the number one, you may have to have him. Goddard is an interesting one. You know, Patriots typically try and take the number one option away. So they may be trying to take the downfield passing away or stop Hurts from rushing. Now, in either event, Goddard is interesting because he is not going to be the guy that they're trying to stop. So with that, I think he is kind of interesting because Big Bell is going to probably let Goddard to try and beat him. And I don't know if Goddard can beat them. Ingram's a nice little stacking option with versus the Colts and Trevor Lawrence in a pretty high game total, and he had some real big games last week, so it's very interesting. Look, defense is total crapshoot. Don't really know what I like here. I think Commanders are interesting. Pretty much, I usually just go with projections and lower ownership. The one thing that I know with defense is it is insanely hard to project. So if I have a defense super high owned, I'm not playing them. I'm going to go with somebody else lower that has a chance. So whoever that may be for you, maybe Commanders for me, go with that. The one thing I say is just don't play a chalky D. It's just not worth it. Too much volatility. Tight end on FanDuel. Sorry, I forgot to go through that one, but Tyler Higbee, Dalton Schultz, both very high owned, and Musgrave with the woes in Green Bay at the wide receiver spot is very interesting. Hawkinson is a little interesting too, but he's expensive on FanDuel. Lower owned, so that intrigues me. Njoku I like a lot. I think low-owned Njoku makes a lot of sense. Look, Kyle Pitts is real hard one here to trust. Had a terrible season last year, but never played with Ritter, really. So we don't know what, that experience is going to be like. And Mariota was just missing guys left and right. So Pitts could easily have a big-time bounce back season, and we know he is an athletic freak. Chig Okonkwo is absolutely interesting. He's a guy that was playing 40% of the snaps and had some really nice games. 6 receptions, 45 yards, a touchdown. That is very possible versus a meh D in the Saints. All right, guys, so that will do it for us today. Nice little breakdown, going over the whole slate. There's so many options on this slate. The one thing I do have to stress, the projections are the most volatile this week. Do not be scared to get away from what the field is doing. This is the week that it is probably the easiest to get different of the entire season, just because we don't know what we don't know. And there's a lot of stuff we don't know. There's a lot of volatility in the projections this week and in what it says on depth charts. There could be guys in spot 1 just because they're vets and they're not going to play a ton. Or it could be they're a high draft pick in, RB1 spot, but they don't really trust them to go, 80% of the carries and snaps, and they want a guy that they know and trust that can pass protect to play a lot of snaps. So ton of volatility. Don't be afraid to get weird. Good luck. Let's win some money. See you guys back next week. Adios.